Speaking of challenges, the NATO is facing one, and I'm not talking about Russia. I'm talking about the drama over Sweden's application. They've been talking for months, but Sweden has still not been able to join the group. It has still not been able to convince the holdouts, Turkey and Hungary. The two nations are refusing to give Sweden the nod, and this is a challenge that must be overcome because to join the NATO, all members have to agree. So what will it take for Turkey and Hungary to relent? Well, the US is on the job now. It is using the old carrot and stick approach. For Turkey, the Americans are offering the F-16 carrot. For Hungary, they have a military stick. A US senator has blocked a $735 million arms sale to Hungary. Our next report has the details.
I, from the Swedish side, argue that we have done enough to justify ratification of the Swedish application. We haven't reached a conclusion in that area, and we have agreed to continue the talks ahead of Vilnius, and then we can see. And I don't speculate when that decision will be taken, and this is a Turkish decision and a Hungarian decision.
That was Oskar Stenström, Sweden's chief negotiator. What's he negotiating? Sweden's NATO membership. Stockholm had applied to join NATO last year, along with its neighbour Finland. And while Finland has already become a NATO member country, Sweden's accession is still uncertain. The biggest problem is Turkey. Newly re-elected President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has blocked Sweden's bid for months now. Erdogan has a bone to pick with Stockholm. It's over what he calls Kurdish terrorists. Groups of Kurds fighting for independence in Turkey had found refuge in Sweden, and Ankara wanted Stockholm to give them up, which it has. Sweden enacted a new anti-terror law recently. It targets these groups that have upset Erdogan. Stockholm is also extraditing Kurds to placate Turkey. But it seems that Erdogan has shifted the goalposts. He now says that Sweden must stop what he calls anti-Turkey protests conducted by the Kurdish groups. That's, of course, a blatant violation of the right to free speech. And besides, Sweden has complied with Turkey's previous demands. You can imagine that Stockholm is starting to get frustrated. But maybe there's another reason Erdogan continues to hold out. He's eyeing a tantalizing prize: F-16 fighter jets and modernization kits from the US. US-Turkey defense ties have been strained for a while now. Washington has given Ankara the cold shoulder ever since it bought defense equipment from Moscow. This was in 2019. So, Erdogan believes he can use Sweden's NATO bid as leverage to start buying American arms again. And US President Joe Biden seems to be playing ball. While speaking about Erdogan last month, Biden said, and I quote, "He still wants to work on something on the F-16s. I told him we wanted a deal with Sweden, so let's get that done." While this game of the Price is Right continues with Turkey, the US isn't playing games when it comes to Hungary. The Eastern European nation is also sitting on Sweden's bid, but for more personal reasons. Reports say Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán is in a huff. He's annoyed that Sweden accused him of curbing media freedom, the rule of law, and democracy. A host of other Western nations have criticized Orbán, but Sweden is the country that needs something from Hungary. It needs Orbán's nod to join NATO. And Orbán is flexing his veto power, perhaps in the hopes of a heartfelt apology. But it seems the US doesn't want to wait for Orbán's hurt feelings to heal. It's showing Hungary the stick. US Senator Jim Risch has blocked a $735 million arms sale to the country. He clearly stated it was over Hungary blocking Sweden's NATO bid. Hungary has hit back by saying it wasn't expecting the equipment anyway. But the move confirms that patience is running thin in Washington.
So we believe, and you've heard from this president multiple times, that we believe Sweden should become a NATO member as soon as possible. That is what the president has said. He has shown his support. That is what we've seen from Congress as well. And so, look, we're going to continue to stay steadfast.
The next NATO summit is on the 11th of July. Sweden wants to officially be welcomed during that summit. It's a race against the clock. Sweden's backers are employing every trick in the book to get its membership done by that deadline. Will they succeed? We'll keep you updated as this unfolds.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi begins his US visit next week. The White House is rolling out the red carpet. There will be a state dinner, an address to the US Congress, engagements with the diaspora, a lot of pomp and celebration. Now, as Prime Minister, he's visited the US almost every year. But this is his first state visit. And it's the beginning of a major shift. The US wants to bring India into its defense orbit. So Washington is opening its walls. It is offering India access to some of its prized possessions. We told you about the transfer of the jet engine technology last night. It's a very big deal. So is the drone deal. The Americans have been trying to sell these drones to India for a while now. It's finally happening. India is buying 30 elite armed drones. The deal is worth $3 billion, and it may change the complexion of the India-US relationship. Tonight, we'll tell you how. First, let's talk about the drones being bought. A lot of fancy names are doing the rounds. Reaper, Predator, Sea Guardian. What exactly is India buying? Well, broadly, three types of drones are on the table. The MQ-1, the MQ-9, and the MQ-9B. Now, the MQ-1 is also called the Predator. It can be used for surveillance and attacks. It has an updated version, and that is called the MQ-9 Reaper. It's also called the Predator B. How is this different? Well, it can move faster and it can carry more munitions. Then you have the third type, the MQ-9B Sea Guardian. This is a surveillance drone used largely for surveillance and reconnaissance missions for maritime security. And it's not new to India. The Indian Navy operates 2 of these drones. They've got them on lease. They're used to watch the Indian Ocean region. So these 3 drones are on offer. Now, India can buy 1 or all of these, and the total number they've agreed on is 30. Where will India use these drones? In all 3 services, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. They have 5 broad operational requirements. Number 1 is broader security, which is self-explanatory. You monitor the threats and you keep track of what's happening at the border. Number 2 is counter-terrorism operations. I'm talking about striking with stealth. Number 3, maritime security. India has a vast coastline and the drones can be put to good use there. Number 4, disaster management. And number 5 is strategic deterrence. These drones have been used in all such operations in the past, not by India, but other countries. Let me give you examples. In 2020, the Predator B was used for a critical mission, the assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. It was a very big operation. President Donald Trump had given the orders, and the strike happened in Baghdad. Even before Soleimani got off his plane, his fate was sealed. This drone, the Predator B, was loitering in the air. As Soleimani deboarded, the drone captured him live. It followed Soleimani for 10 minutes. The general was traveling in a convoy with 2 cars. The camera on the drone captured him. That photograph was used to identify and confirm his presence, to determine which car he's in, where he's sitting, and what he's wearing. Soleimani, as it turned out, was in the first car. Once he was ID'd, it was time to attack. The Predator B was armed with a Hellfire missile. This missile can be fired from the air and it can be guided by lasers. So the Hellfire was fired, and that was the end of Qasem Soleimani. India too has such missiles. All it needs is the drone. It will give our forces the capability to strike an enemy without putting boots on the ground. The Predator is a fiercely capable machine. It can fly non-stop for 24 hours, an entire day, at the height of 50,000 feet. It's been tested in combat situations. Like in the 1990s, the Predator drone was deployed for NATO's airstrikes in Serbia. It has been used in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Americans, of course, operate this drone. The Brits have also bought it. In the war against the ISIS, the UK deployed the Predator B in more than 2,400 missions. That's almost 2 missions every day. Do you know which other countries have this drone? France, Italy, Spain, Japan, the Netherlands. And now India will join this Predator club. Where will New Delhi deploy it? We've already told you about the Indian Ocean. The drone was also used to watch China's activities along the Himalayan border, to keep an eye on the PLA, the Chinese army. It can be useful to carry out surgical strikes too, to deter cross-border infiltration and to secure exclusive economic zones and maritime interests. These drones have multiple capabilities, so they'll have a wide range of applications. And India needs them to counter its adversaries. Pakistan and China are arming themselves too. They have their own drone programs. China has something called the CH-5 Rainbow drone. And Pakistan gets drones from countries like China and Turkey. In fact, Pakistan is believed to have China's Skyhawk 4 and the Wing Loong UAV, also the Turkish Bayraktar drone. How do they compare to the Predator and the Sea Guardian? Well, most reports and experts say the American machines are superior, so India can claim a lead. But remember, these technologies are fast changing and there's a proliferation of drones across the world. Each country is trying to catch up. Until India comes up with domestic options, it's best to be equipped for the emerging threats. Meanwhile, in South Asia, there's a major storm, Cyclone Biparjoy. It made landfall yesterday. This was in Western India. Biparjoy is a Bengali word. It means disaster or calamity. Thankfully, in this case, the damage was not as much as it could have been. Although 2 people have died and 23 are injured. This was in the Indian state of Gujarat. But like I said, it could have been much worse. The cyclone is still around, but it's in a reduced state. It's now being classified as a cyclonic storm, the lowest in the 5-category system. It will continue to cause heavy rains, but the wind speeds have reduced, and this has allowed cleanup work to begin. Here's a report.
Yesterday, India and Pakistan were on high alert. A cyclone approached the western Indian state of Gujarat, Cyclone Biparjoy. It made landfall last evening, but its fury was mostly concentrated on trees and infrastructure. That's because authorities were prepared. India had evacuated over 100,000 vulnerable people from Gujarat's coastal regions. Pakistan moved about 82,000 people to safety. And it helped. In India, the loss of life was limited.
2 people died before the landfall, which is sad news. However, the preparations for the cyclone proved helpful as there were no casualties after the landfall. At least 24 animals have died and 23 people have sustained injuries. But there has not been any loss of lives after the landfall. The electricity supply has been disrupted in about 1,000 villages.
The 2 people who died were shepherds. They tried to protect their flock from the rough seas and torrential rains. Sadly, they died trying to save their animals. This was a while before Cyclone Biparjoy made landfall. No deaths have been reported since. However, the cyclone has left a trail of destruction in its wake. Buildings have collapsed, trees have been uprooted, vast swathes of land are flooded, and about 4,600 villages in Gujarat are without electricity. That's due to the cyclone's winds knocking out power lines. The winds also caused a fire at a major port. It caused a stockpile of coal to ignite, sending embers and smoke over the Oka port. But the worst seems to be over, and cleanup operations have begun.
The number of tree falls in Mandvi have risen. Yesterday, only a few small structures collapsed, but judging by the wind speed, the damage might be worse today.
The cyclone hasn't dissipated yet. It's still around, but in a weakened state. Before making landfall, it was categorized as a very severe cyclonic storm. Now it's being labeled a cyclonic storm. The severity has subsided. The wind speeds have reduced, but it'll continue to bring moderate to heavy rains wherever it goes.
Moving northeastward, the cyclone will be centered toward South Rajasthan and North Gujarat on June 16 evening, and it will then weaken and turn into a depression.
And it seems the cyclone mostly affected India. Pakistan was mostly spared. Life there is returning to normal.
By the grace of God, the cyclone has passed and there are no more threats. So people have started fishing again and coming back to normal life. Also, people are coming back to their homes.
The last cyclone to hit this part of South Asia caused about 100 deaths. This was Cyclone Tokte in 2021. A cyclone in 1998 killed over 1,000 according to official figures. It seems this time authorities have learnt from the past and managed to restrict the human cost.
To live is to suffer. This is a famous quote by Friedrich Nietzsche. Many would agree. Now, this suffering can take various forms. But for the Chinese, it often takes the avatar of what they call white people food. Seriously, that's what they have named Western packed lunches, white people food. Plain ingredients like raw vegetables, sliced meats, and crackers. The Chinese are trying this food, then letting their innermost emotions run free by roasting the meals, not in the way you'd imagine. They say, this is the lunch of suffering, or this meal shows what it's like to be dead, and this trend is going viral. But is it simply to poke fun, or does it hold a deeper meaning? Our next report tells you.
This is a viral video of a woman on a train in Switzerland. She's eating a bag of lettuce with ham and a packet of mustard. For many, this isn't a big deal, but for the users on Chinese social media, this food is lawless and outrageous, or the lunch of suffering. They claim even a rabbit would kick away this food. This video garnered so much criticism online, it sparked a culinary trend. Now the Chinese, both at home and abroad, are trying white people food. Yes, that's what they're calling it. They're trying Western packed lunch, which is usually eaten in Europe, the US, and Australia. Think veggies, crackers, cold cuts, boiled eggs, and the occasional piece of fruit. After what they call suffering this food, they're letting their inner Gordon Ramsay run wild by going online and expressing their critique on Chinese blogs, and doing so quite unabashedly. One user said he saw a woman buy raw sliced mushrooms, then eat it at the supermarket. He says he was dumbfounded. Another user shared their colleague's lunch. It was baby carrots and spinach, and went on to ask how anyone can be energetic after eating such food. But if you still lack clarity, one TikTok user clearly explained what white people food means. First, it has no spices. Why? The user says it's because the food doesn't prioritize enjoyment. Next, it involves minimal preparation. And lastly, it's eaten at work or school. So once people get back home, they can finally eat so-called normal food and get their life back. The user really didn't mince their words. But why are Chinese people poking fun at Western food? Experts say because they're fascinated. Chinese people are used to labor-intensive food, where cooking involves a lot of different ingredients, like a mix of vegetables, meat, and grains with a bunch of different spices. So while Chinese people are used to an explosion of flavor, eating only crackers, cheese, and ham can seem jarring. But this food roasting session is more than just an online trend. It's a representation of how many people in China are making a shift from elaborate to simple eating, even if they're doing so with grudging acceptance. Why? Because of China's grueling work culture, where most workers follow what's called the 996. It involves working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. It sounds crazy, but 996 is pervasive in the country. Reports say people regularly work more than 300 hours every month, far surpassing legal limits in China. And the result? Apart from the physical and emotional toll of overwork, people lack the time to prepare elaborate meals, or even go out to grab food. So they're trying, albeit with difficulty, to accept simple meals, but also finding humor in the misery. Some say that while this trend may have made them suffer, it also helped them save time, money, and a lot of calories. But many aren't convinced. One commentator said, if such a meal is to extend life, what is the meaning of life?
Drones are hard power. There's nothing subtle or graceful about lethal flying machines. But hard power can only get you so far. You also need soft power. Some countries organically develop it, others just buy it. And seems like sports is on everyone's shopping list. West Asia is leading the way. They're using petrodollars to buy sports clubs and leagues. Manchester United could be the latest. They're in talks with a Qatari businessman, Manchester United, and this businessman is the son of their former prime minister, so it's pretty much a government-backed deal. How much is Qatar offering? $6 billion to buy the whole club. But there's a rival bid on the table. It's come from British billionaire Jim Ratcliffe. Now, reports say the Qatari offer is better. So right now, the club is considering granting exclusivity to Qatar. What does that mean? Exclusivity means the club can only negotiate with Qatar. The other buyers are out for that period. It's certainly a good sign for Qatar. They could soon own one of the most iconic clubs in football. It's massive, but it's not unprecedented. Gulf countries do own multiple clubs already. The UAE owns Manchester City. A Saudi group owns Newcastle United, and a Qatari businessman owns PSG. At least these are clubs. In the case of golf, Saudi Arabia has bought the entire sport, and I'm not even joking. Golf was run by a non-profit called PGA. They contracted players and they ran all the major events across the world. But last year, Saudi Arabia launched their own league. It's called Live Golf. One by one, they poached PGA players. They offered them hundreds of millions of dollars. At first, the PGA objected. They filed legal cases against players who joined Live Golf. But now, they've done a U-turn. Earlier this month, PGA and Live Golf decided to make peace. They're calling it a merger. But let's be real. This is a hostile takeover by Saudi Arabia. There are two obstacles, though. I mentioned that PGA was non-profit. As a result, they paid no taxes in the United States. But Congress wants to change that. American politicians want to strip PGA of its tax-exempt status, and that could affect Riyadh. Secondly, the U.S. Department of Justice is probing this merger. They fear it could limit competition, perhaps violate antitrust laws. Either of these could derail the merger. Now, if you're sitting in India and thinking it's only golf, well, think again. Saudi Arabia is also coming after cricket. They're planning something like the IPL. Reports say the International Cricket Council, the ICC, will soon sanction it. Now, cricket leagues are not new. Australia has them. So do South Africa, England and Pakistan. But none of them come close to the IPL, and that's where Saudi Arabia is different. Their league could potentially cannibalize the IPL. How? By contracting Indian players. Now, we know the Indian board, the BCCI, does not allow Indian players to compete abroad. They play only in the IPL. Saudi Arabia wants to change that. They're looking to offer all-year contracts to Indian players, basically make cricket like football. Clubs will come first, countries second. Take any sport, and this is what's happening. Saudi Aramco is one of the biggest sponsors in Formula One. Some Gulf states are also shopping for NBA teams. It's an unprecedented sports takeover, one that covers every sport and every league, which also means there is a lot of criticism. You see, these clubs are part of a legacy. So the argument is toxic Gulf states are buying up that legacy. But the clubs will be tainted by the purchase, which is a fair argument. Sports washing is happening all around us. But let's not pretend all the previous owners were symbols of purity. There were enough shady characters going around. Meet Donald Sterling. He owned NBA team Los Angeles Clippers for 30 years. He's been accused of sexual harassment and racism. In fact, he used the N-word to describe his players. Sterling holds a unique record in the US. He was federally prosecuted for racism. Imagine that. Another example is Silvio Berlusconi, the former Italian prime minister who passed away this week. He owned football club AC Milan. His controversies have their own Wikipedia page. Sexual harassment, underage sex, financial irregularities, praising Mussolini. The list is pretty long. Then you have Russian oligarchs. They own clubs across Europe. Roman Abramovich owned Chelsea from 2003 to 2022. Others include AS Monaco, Sydney FC, and AFC Bournemouth. Nobody objected until Russia invaded Ukraine. So my point is this: sports washing is not new. Rich and problematic men have always dominated sports. Now there are rich, problematic, and Arab men. And I'm not saying that justifies it. I'm only saying that the outrage should have started decades ago. The politics of sports is all about one thing: money. Why did these club owners sell to Gulf states in the first place? Why did they not protect the legacy? Because money. We used to say that sports is a vehicle for change, for reform, for activism. But today it's a political pawn. If you have the money, the pawn is yours. And before we wrap, here's something that I want to share with you. Next week is going to be special. We are going to bring you special episodes of Vantage from from the US as we cover Prime Minister Modi's state visit to America. Don't miss that. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Some 2,500 South Korean and American troops took part in joint exercises marking the 70th anniversary of the alliance between the two nations. Swedish climate activists put red handprints on Claude Monet's painting. Tourists in an Australian park were filmed fighting off a feisty kangaroo. And finally, what makes the 16th of June significant? Taking you back in history to the year 1976. When the Soweto uprising took place in South Africa, police brutally attacked thousands of protesting school children, and this incident marked the beginning of the end of the apartheid system. We're leaving you with these images. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on Monday from the US.
F-15K 전투기 편대가 MK-80 원거리에서 통제하여 은밀하게 적을 타격 시 직접 충돌 및 공중 폭파 등 다양한
Situationen är akut. Pandemin var ingenting jämfört med klimatkollapsen. Det som kommer kan vi inte ens föreställa oss. Som sjuksköterska kommer inte att kunna ge er någon trygghet. Vi kommer också drabbas av svält, vattenbrist, konflikter.
Helen!